YNW Melly's game might finally be over, and the biggest betrayal could come from his own best friend. Will loyalty survive, or will Bortlen testify against him to save himself? On one side is YNW Melly. If convicted, he'll never see freedom again. On the other side is his closest friend, YNW Bortlen, offered just 16 years instead of life. The question is, will he take the deal and turn on Melly? Imagine this. Two choices: spend the rest of your life behind bars, or walk free after just 16 years. That's the choice in front of YNW Bortlen. And one decision could end Melly's life forever. YNW Melly, whose real name is Jamal Demons, recently appeared in court wearing regular clothes for the first time in months. The judge has begun the long process of selecting a new jury, and emotions in the courtroom are running high. Even Melly's mother admitted the sight left her heartbroken and helpless. The state wasted no time laying out the brutal reality of what YNW Melly is up against. If convicted, he isn't just facing one life sentence, he's staring down 5 separate life sentences stacked on top of each other, plus an additional 75 years. To put it plainly, if the jury finds him guilty on all counts, he will never step foot outside of prison again. There would be no hope of parole, no chance at a reduced term, and no future beyond the walls of Florida State Prison. For prosecutors, this paints a picture of justice served. But for Melly, it represents the end of everything: his music career, his freedom, and the life he once lived before all of this began. In sharp contrast stands his co-defendant, YNW Bortlen, whose real name is Cortland Henry. Unlike Melly, Bortlen has been presented with an option, a way out, at least partially. The state has offered him a plea deal that could drastically alter the trajectory of his case. Instead of spending the rest of his life behind bars, Bortlen could accept a sentence of 16 years. With credit for the time he has already served, that number shrinks even further, giving him the possibility of returning to society as a free man while still young enough to live some kind of life. On the surface, the choice seems obvious. 16 years, though undeniably long, is survivable. Life without parole, on the other hand, is not. And that's exactly the leverage prosecutors are banking on. By dangling the deal in front of Bortlen, they're hoping to secure his cooperation, to have him testify against Melly and fill in the gaps that the state believes will seal its case. This is where the stakes truly shift. Melly and Bortlen were once close, bound by loyalty, music, and the shared identity of the YNW collective. But now, under the pressure of the justice system, that brotherhood is cracking. The state doesn't need both men to spend life in prison. They only need one. And if persuading Bortlen to turn on Melly is what it takes, they've made it clear they're willing to strike that bargain. The plea deal itself is more than just a legal strategy, it's a psychological weapon. By presenting Bortlen with the stark contrast, spend forever in a cell or serve 16 years and walk free, the prosecutors place him in a moral and emotional vice. What friend, what brother, could truly endure the thought of life behind bars if there was a way out? For many watching the case unfold, the writing is already on the wall. The pressure will be too great, and Bortlen will eventually give in. Public reaction has been divided. Some argue that Bortlen has no choice but to accept. Others see the deal as a betrayal, a setup designed to turn best friends into enemies in the courtroom. Even fellow artists have weighed in. Rapper Offset reacted publicly to news of the plea, saying, "Damn, Melly getting snitched on by his best friend. Free that boy. He's been locked up too long." Offset's words reflect a sentiment shared by many in the hip-hop community, that the state is intentionally tearing apart bonds to secure a conviction. But to prosecutors, this is simply justice at work. They believe Bortlen has knowledge that directly implicates Melly. And if his testimony helps secure a guilty verdict, the deal will have done exactly what it was designed to do. Behind all of this is the haunting reality that trials like these are rarely about truth alone. They're about strategy, power, and leverage. Melly's defense will continue to paint him as innocent, a victim of a system eager to make an example out of him. The state, meanwhile, will use every tool at its disposal, from digital evidence to forensic reports to personal testimonies. Bortlen's plea deal is just one more weapon in their arsenal. For Melly, the knowledge that his co-defendant might testify against him must be crushing. In a trial already stacked with complex evidence, the words of someone who was there that night could carry devastating weight. If Bortlen confirms even a fraction of what prosecutors allege, the jury will have a first-hand account to anchor their verdict. And for Melly, that could mean the end. What makes the situation even more complicated is the timeline. With Melly's retrial postponed until 2027, prosecutors have years to pressure Bortlen, refine their case, and ensure that every piece of evidence is admissible. Time, in this instance, is not on Melly's side. The longer the delay, the more room the state has to tighten the noose. The contrast between the two men's futures couldn't be sharper. One faces the possibility of life after prison. The other faces a lifetime of prison itself. And that contrast is exactly what makes the plea deal such a devastating blow. As the case moves forward, one truth becomes harder to ignore. This is no longer just a trial about what happened to Sack Chaser and Juvie. It's much deeper than a single act of violence. At its core, it has become a trial about loyalty, survival, and the crushing weight of impossible choices. For YNW Melly, the nightmare seems endless. What started as a criminal investigation has evolved into years of delays, mistrials, and mounting evidence. Each new development adds another layer of pressure, whether it's the discovery of jail phone calls, testimony from former associates, or the possibility of key witnesses like Mariah Hamilton taking the stand. Even before a verdict is reached, the process itself feels like a punishment. Every headline, every leaked detail, every court hearing chips away at his freedom and his image. Meanwhile, YNW Bortlen stands at a crossroads. On one side is loyalty to his longtime friend and collaborator, a bond built through music, struggle, and shared dreams. On the other side is the promise of freedom, an offer from prosecutors that would allow him to reclaim some part of his life instead of dying behind bars. 16 years is a long sentence, but compared to 5 life terms, it feels almost merciful. The state knows this, and that's why the deal exists, to test how far loyalty can bend under the weight of survival. The stakes are brutally clear. If Bortlen testifies against Melly, it could provide the prosecution with exactly what they need, a first-hand account that ties Melly to the crime scene. Juries are often swayed by physical evidence, but the words of a co-defendant, someone who was allegedly there, carry an undeniable force. If Bortlen refuses, he risks losing everything, condemned to spend his life in a cell for choosing loyalty over self-preservation. This is why the trial feels bigger than the charges themselves. It is a story about fractured brotherhoods, about the choices people make when cornered by the system, and about how quickly friendships can collapse under the glare of a courtroom. For Melly, the nightmare is far from over. For Bortlen, the choice he makes in the coming months could decide not only his own fate, but Melly's as well. That offer has sent shockwaves through the case. Rapper Offset even reacted publicly, saying, "Damn, Melly getting snitched on by his best friend. Free that boy. He's been locked up too long." The difference in punishment is staggering. Bortlen's charges include witness tampering, directing criminal activity, and accessory to murder. Alone, they each carry decades, or even life, in prison. But with the plea deal, they'd all be bundled into a single 16-year sentence. For prosecutors, the goal is clear: secure Bortlen's testimony against Melly. Investigators have long suspected Bortlen was hiding the truth. In an early interrogation, when asked if he'd reveal who committed the crime, he couldn't give a straight yes or no. His body language, shaking his head instead of answering firmly, signaled deception. Detectives believed he knew more than he was saying, and the evidence supported that. Federal agents already had social media messages where Melly allegedly admitted involvement. What they wanted was Bortlen's confirmation. Meanwhile, Melly seemed confident in his defense. Even while locked up, he reportedly ordered a $100,000 diamond chain, expecting freedom after his mistrial. Friends, however, criticized how much money he spent on jewelry instead of focusing fully on legal defense. That confidence took a hit when news broke that Melly's retrial had been delayed again, this time until January 2027. The court granted prosecutors more time to strengthen their case, and part of that strategy includes keeping Melly and Bortlen completely separated under a no-communication order. The intention is obvious: isolate Bortlen and push him closer to turning against Melly. From the state's perspective, trying both men together would be efficient and increase the chances of them incriminating each other. From the defense's side, separating the trials could allow each to shift blame. But there's a critical twist. During Melly's first trial, his own lawyers tried suggesting that Bortlen was the one responsible. That move destroyed any remaining loyalty. Since then, the two haven't spoken. Now, everything points to Bortlen taking the deal. For him, 16 years is survivable. Life in prison is not. And if he cooperates, prosecutors will finally have the inside testimony they need to convict Melly when his retrial begins in 2027. Cortland Henry, better known as YNW Bortlen, has been at the center of serious suspicion. Prosecutors claim he showed up at a hospital after the shooting, but not as a bystander. Instead, he was behind the wheel of a car riddled with bullets, carrying 2 bodies. On top of that, he had changed clothes and reportedly had gunpowder residue on his hands, clear signs. Investigators argued that he had fired a weapon. From the beginning, prosecutors say Bortlen lied. He lied about where the incident happened, how it happened, and even claimed he didn't have a phone, something the prosecution found ridiculous. Even Melly's own lawyers pointed out to the jury that it was Bortlen who couldn't give the feds straight answers. To make things worse, forensic experts were brought in to testify. Tests showed particles of gunpowder residue on both of Bortlen's hands. While not overwhelming amounts, it was enough for prosecutors to argue that he had indeed fired a weapon. When Melly's mistrial was declared, Bortlen posted a cryptic tweet, "Mind games don't work on people like me," with a handshake emoji. Many saw it as a sign he was preparing to cut a deal. Not long after, things escalated. Bortlen was arrested on a witness tampering charge. Court documents revealed that between April and July 2023, while Melly's jury selection and trial were happening, Bortlen allegedly tried to mislead or pressure a witness connected to the case. The timing was suspicious. July 22nd, the very day Melly's mistrial was declared, was also the date tied to Bortlen's alleged tampering. During a raid on Bortlen's home, investigators found something even more troubling: handwritten notes describing jurors, including where they sat in court and what they looked like. To prosecutors, it looked like Bortlen might have been planning something dangerous if the jury convicted Melly. One commentator compared it to robbing a store and then leaving the security footage in your DVD player. Sloppy and incriminating. Prosecutors believe Bortlen could do real damage to Melly's defense because he can validate new pieces of evidence. For example, the night of the crime, rapper Fredo Bang reportedly picked Melly up on the side of the road around 4:42 a.m. digital. Drop pins from Melly's phone confirm his exact location and movements. The state also wants to use social media evidence tying Melly to YSL, a gang connected to Young Thug, arguing that Melly publicly identified with them through posts and hand signs. Melly, however, grew frustrated when his legal team tried to block the use of this evidence. In open court, he was overheard yelling at his own lawyers to let prosecutors use it, insisting he wasn't in a gang and that Bortlen would only end up confirming it anyway. The problem for Melly is this: if Bortlen takes a plea deal and agrees to testify, he'll be the missing puzzle piece prosecutors need. Every bit of evidence, from digital pings to gang associations, could be backed up by someone who was right there the night it all happened. And given his own legal troubles, Bortlen has every reason to talk. The most damaging piece of evidence prosecutors want to use against YNW Melly involves someone from his past. An Exoblock member once gave a public interview before King Von was killed and before Melly's arrest, claiming that Melly had confided in Von about problems with 2 close friends. According to the interview, Melly hinted that those friends were trying to extort him. The state plans to argue that this conversation points directly to a motive. With Melly's retrial delayed until 2027, prosecutors now have 2 years to get this type of evidence admitted. If Bortlen cooperates and confirms it, Melly's chances of avoiding a life sentence shrink dramatically. But Melly has another major problem: his ex-girlfriend, Mariah Hamilton. During his first trial in 2023, she never testified because she had fled the country. That absence was one of the key reasons Melly wasn't found guilty. Everything changed a month ago when Mariah returned to the U.S. Border Patrol agents, arrested her at Miami International Airport as soon as she landed. Court records revealed she had been ordered to testify in the original trial. Missing her family, she decided to come back, but ended up spending a week in jail before her first court appearance. At that hearing, the judge made her an offer: testify against Melly and walk free. She agreed immediately. Soon after, she posted on Facebook, "To my village, thank you. I love you all so much. God's plan, not mine." For Melly, this is devastating. Mariah not only knows details about what happened to Sack Chaser and Juvie, but prosecutors also have evidence linking her to possible witness tampering. If she confirms just one message showing Melly pressured her to avoid testifying, he could face a separate life sentence, regardless of whether the jury convicts him in the murder case. In fact, Melly is already facing 6 new charges, including witness tampering, directing criminal activity, conspiracy, and unlawful use of communication devices. Some of these alone can carry a life sentence. The allegations claim Melly used jail calls and other methods to pressure Mariah into leaving the country. Investigators even discovered voicemails in her iCloud where Melly allegedly told her to go away. Juvie's father later spoke out in an interview, saying Melly was using coded messages, passing notes through others, and even involving Mariah's family in attempts to keep her quiet. This, prosecutors argue, shows just how far Melly was willing to go to prevent her from testifying. Meanwhile, Melly's mother, Jamie King, says the jail has gone too far by banning her son from making phone calls for over a year. She insists Melly hasn't been convicted of anything and should at least have the right to speak with family or send letters. In her words, "My son has not been convicted of anything. They hold his mail, they don't give it to him, and they don't even allow him the same rights other inmates have." Authorities, however, believe the restrictions are justified. If Melly really was using those calls to tamper with witnesses, then cutting off his communication isn't punishment, it's a safeguard. And if that evidence is presented in court, it could be the final blow that ensures Melly spends the rest of his life in prison. Melly's legal troubles aren't just about evidence, they also touch on how he's been treated behind bars. His mother, Jamie King, has repeatedly spoken out, saying the jail makes its own rules without oversight. She explained that even after raising complaints in court, the judge admitted he had no real control over how the jail operates. For her, it feels unfair. They need to answer to someone too. That frustration drew mixed reactions online. Charleston White mocked the situation, saying Melly deserves no sympathy. When you take a life, homie, you don't get the right to complain about mistreatment. On the other hand, rapper Boosie showed compassion toward Jamie King, saying he met her while Melly was locked up. "She's real, bro. She's stressed out. Reminds me of what my own mom went through. She's a good woman." But beyond the debate about jail treatment, prosecutors believe Bortlen holds the key to some of the most damning evidence yet. Just 5 hours after the murders, Melly and Bortlen were allegedly caught on video dancing in a parking lot, showing no grief for the deaths of their close friends Sackchaser and Juvie. Even more damaging is surveillance footage from just 30 minutes before the crime. It shows Melly sitting in the back left seat of the Jeep for about 20 minutes before anyone else got in. Ballistics evidence later indicated that shots fired in the car came from that same back left position. Prosecutors say Bortlen can confirm this timeline. Court records state, the direction of items traveling from left to right in the car supports the claim that they originated from the back left seat, where Melly was positioned. That claim was further supported by Juvie's mother, who testified in court. She confirmed that her son entered the back right seat, and that she personally saw Melly get into the back left seat, the exact spot prosecutors argue the shots came from. All of this piles up to a grim picture for Melly. With witness testimony, forensic evidence, digital data, and now the possibility of his co-defendant turning against him, prosecutors are building a case designed to leave no room for doubt when the retrial finally begins in 2027.